let's go way back. Years ago, and I'm going to take this off the screen. Years ago, there was an announcement that Netflix was going to develop this more grounded street level corner of the MCU. They talked about how they're going to make Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and it was all going to culminate in the Defenders. And at the time, I was so excited about that. It was pretty early days of the MCU, but you could already feel how big it was getting. The spectacle, the interconnectedness of it. None of the characters had secret identities. So you didn't have any of those really personal Spider-Man-esque or Daredevil-esque stories. And none of them had the maturity of a Daredevil or a Punisher. So that was really exciting. Now they're trying to do that again. They announced that they're creating a Marvel Spotlight banner. And Echo is the first show to come out under the Marvel Spotlight banner. The problem is this announcement is being met with a lot less excitement than the one from a few years ago. Because when it came to Netflix, they announced we're going to do this, and then they went and made all those shows. In this case, they made Echo. Then there were all these rumors that there was a ton of difficulty behind the production. There were rumors that the show isn't very good. And then they announced it's only 5 episodes. We're going to release them all at once. And again, no one has said this, but the rumor is that it's to sort of rip the Band-Aid off. We don't want to pull his ass off and just can it, but let's just put it out there all at once, and then we can all move on with our lives. And to try and not tarnish the Marvel brand, they're like, just call it it's Marvel Spotlight. It'll confuse everybody. They're going to think it's a Sony movie or something. So if this was announced 3 years ago, if this was announced right after Endgame, the biggest movie in the MCU continuity, and at that point, everyone wants to go smaller, because if you just keep going bigger, you stop caring. If Marvel Spotlight was announced right after that, I think people would have been really excited about it. I know I would have been really excited about it. So we have Echo. And despite everything I heard about it going in, I was rooting for it. Because like we have said time and time again, I think that's what the MCU needs to do. It needs to get smaller, more personal stories, and therefore actually higher stakes. So before I give my thoughts, I watched only the first 2 episodes right before this. First off, who is Echo? So her father is part of Kingpin's gang, and this character was introduced in Hawkeye. And in that show, we learned that her father is part of Kingpin's gang. She was partly raised by Kingpin. She calls him uncle. Her father was then killed by Hawkeye when he was going by Ronin, and he was out for blood and vengeance. But it turns out Kingpin orchestrated the hit. He leaked the information to Ronin so he would kill her father. TLDR, Kingpin killed Echo's father. Just she wants revenge. And she gets revenge. In Hawkeye, she supposedly kills Kingpin, but we all know he's coming back. I think at that point, we already knew he was coming back for Daredevil, so it was kind of an obvious fake out. All right, so I watched the first 2 episodes. And I would say the headline is that the show, at least based on these 2 episodes, is a complete mess, especially episode 1. It starts with her as a child and then very quickly sort of montages its way through her life, but it tries to weave through the events of Hawkeye. So it'll be like there's a girl named Maya. She has a father. Cut 2, her father is killed by Ronin. Cut 2, she finds out that Kingpin actually orchestrated it. Cut 2, a random fight with Daredevil that happened in between scenes we didn't see before, total fan service. Cut 2, she finds out Kingpin killed her father and she gets revenge on him. And that's halfway through the episode. Now she's coming back to her hometown in Oklahoma, which feels like where the episode should have started. She's coming home. And we wonder why. We're intrigued why she's there. We find out, and then we get on board with some new story. So it's just very hectic. And then when it does get focused in, and she's coming back home, and you wonder why she's there, her motivations are very unclear, you start to realize she wants revenge. She already got revenge, but apparently that wasn't good enough. The king is dead. Maybe it's time for a queen. So I guess she wants to take over the gang. The problem is, I don't really emotionally connect with that motivation. Like, remember in John Wick, when his puppy gets killed. You could taste the blood of his enemies in your mouth. It was so satisfying when he started killing them. You wanted it so bad. But here, it's like you have a montage where she loses her father, convoluted, figures out that it was Kingpin who did it, gets revenge, and now we join her character. At this point, there's no hook. I don't care about the proceedings at all, and it was a mess to get us here.
It just sounds like such weak storytelling. Like, why not show her as an adult going through whatever things she's going through as an adult and get us to like care about her and learn about her past like almost every other show does.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's you criticize shows or you talk about why they're good, and it's always the same formula. The show does great character development, so you connect with them. And then when they're in danger, you care and you hope for them to succeed. It's so straightforward. It's always mind-boggling when they don't do it. And actually, I did find the main character and some of the supporting characters likable and intriguing, but the intrigue never amounts to anything. You never really get to know Maya. And as you get to know her motivation, you don't connect with them and they're not very interesting. And you don't really get what her end game is. Episode 2, there's this whole sequence of her sneaking onto a train. And how many times have you seen this where someone jumps onto a train and then someone yells to them, "The tunnel's coming up. You got to get off the train or you're going to get hit by the tunnel." And when you have
did she survive?
Shockingly, Daniel, you're not going to believe. Actually, with help from magic powers, she did. And that's another element that just doesn't work, especially when you're trying to tell a more grounded story. And they're trying to do this thing where she connects with her ancestry. And I think there's a story to be told there, but I wish it wasn't done with the use of magic. The opening scene of the show is a cold open where it flashbacks to the first members of her tribe. And there's magic, and it just makes you feel like I'm watching a Marvel movie. When you see Marvel Spotlight, you think, I want to see a more grounded Netflix-esque story. And when you start with the magic thing, it just feels like, oh, it's another MCU, ancient civilization, magic, powers, etc. I will say, the thing that impressed me the most, so this character, she's deaf. She communicates through sign language. And their dedication to that really pays off. They never cheat it. If a character doesn't know sign language, she's going to have difficulty communicating with them unless there's an interpreter present. So Kingpin always has an interpreter by him to speak with her, which even says something about the fact that he was there essentially raising her partly, but never bothered to learn sign language to communicate with her, when basically everybody else in her life that truly cares about her did. And that aspect of it, I think, really worked and actually helps to build the intrigue for the Maya character. Like I said, it just never really pays off, at least not in the first 2 episodes. And the actors do a fine job. Like I said, some of the supporting characters and Maya herself, I liked. They were likable characters. So that's overall where I'm at with it. There were a lot of rumors that, like I said, there was trouble behind the scenes. It feels like there was a bigger story that got cut down and it's all just kind of slapped together. They took stuff out and just tried to make a coherent story out of it. And it's just a mess so far. So, are you shocked, Daniel?
It's really interesting. I don't know. You would just back to like there's a formula to making good shows and movies, right? But I feel like just following the right process is sort of the table stakes, and then it's still hard to execute, right? Like I do think that it's challenging to pull everything off correctly, but it's like when you don't even follow the right process, it's like, are you even really trying? And I feel like I've said this before, but it's like Marvel makes so much content, and they can afford to hire such good people. It's like why do you run into these issues behind the scenes? Like, why can't you like, it's just like business operations. Like, why can't you execute them properly? But I guess when I say that, what I start to think about is, but there's creative effects. And it's like, okay, if creatively they have the wrong direction, then you're going to have poor business operations too, right? Because like things aren't going to work right. Like you're going to have disagreements. It's not making sense. It's not coming out as a good product. And then you start revising it on set and that leads to like nightmares, whatever. So I guess my point is, it's like you could have good processes. You can be an effective company. But I guess if that creative part is missing, everything's going to break down anyway. So there's like a lot they need to get right. So
You can
I guess I have
also
some empathy.
you can also imagine with a big interconnected universe like Marvel, and even if it wasn't interconnected, but just the fact that they have this brand, there are probably deadlines. And you can imagine a scenario where a script just isn't working. You do some rewrites. Hey, we got to start shooting. But nobody wants to be the one to raise their hand and say, hey, I don't think this is working. We have rockets that explode because nobody wanted to raise their hand and say, hey, I saw an issue in the engineering, and there are lives on the line. So when the stakes are lower, like whether or not Gil and Daniel enjoy this streaming show, you don't want to be the one that gets called into Kevin Feige's office to be like, so I hear you don't like the train sequence in episode 2, huh?
Is that what Kevin Feige sounds like?
That's how I picture him in my head.
He's chewing on a cigar.
That's how I would talk if I was the CEO. Or he's the C. He's a chief CCO, I think, chief creative officer. But you can imagine how, and then you try and course correct, right? We shot a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. People don't remember who Echo is, and we didn't properly establish her in our own show. All right, let's try and just weave in some of the Hawkeye stuff. Man, people really want to see Daredevil. We could probably let's shoot a Daredevil scene, throw it in there, make it one take. People love one take. And then you can see how it could get here.
Yeah.
My hope, and we talked about this last time, is that they're doing some self-reflection. The fact that they released it all at once, I would put my money on this as a rip the Band-Aid off approach. They just want to get this show out there and move on. I do think they're doing some self-reflection. The fact that Deadpool 3 is the only movie coming out next year, to me, says something. Because that feels like taking a break from the MCU proper, considering Deadpool has not been part of that. He was from Fox X-Men universe. Captain America 4 delayed a year, and they're doing massive reshoots. I think they're doing some self-reflection. And look, I'm not rooting for Marvel to fail. I think most people aren't rooting for that. At a certain point, I think you get so deep down the rabbit hole of feeling burned by them so many times, you kind of start to, because you want to shove it in their face and say, I didn't like this, you suck. But we've shoved it in their face, and I think they're learning. And I want to take a second. I was thinking this the other day. As much as we crap on the MCU now, it's kind of cool what they did. The fact that we have 30 movies and a bunch of TV shows that are interconnected. That's kind of cool. Let's take a second to just soak that in.
Excitement. I mean, I remember the excitement of seeing Tony Stark as Iron Man in theaters, the first movie, and then realizing that we had so many movies to look forward to, and that Spider-Man was going to come back, like all this stuff. Like that was so exciting. Like it would be so nice to be able to feel that way again.
You know what? Echo is a great show. You see, after the convoluted mess that the MCU has become, what we need is a more intimate character study. And the beautiful thing is it doesn't depend on previous knowledge. You don't have to do any homework by rewatching Hawkeye, for example, because they seamlessly integrate it into the first episode. You'll feel like you've watched it.